Welcome to the first webinar from the series dedicated or attached to the CASSINI Hackathon. My name is Andrei Bocin-Dumitriu, and I'm your host for today. We will start with a short agenda and introduction of the discussion today. And then we have a pretty nice program, including presentation, but also pitches, and then also interactive Q&A. Okay, how many we have, Katya, so far?
I think we have enough to start, and
Okay.
yeah, and I think that people will join. They all received their reminders about the webinar beginning.
Okay,
yes.
Thank you. So again, my name is Andrei Bocin-Dumitriu. I work for ground station dotSPACE, whom together with Royal Haskoning, the EU, will organize the CASSINI Hackathon Netherlands, the 6th edition CASSINI Hackathon Netherlands. The agenda for today, a short introduction from our side about the CASSINI Hackathon. Then we have our keynote speaker, Djeevan Schiferli, climate risk and resilience business strategist, Royal Haskoning DHV, on the topic of climate risk and resilience. Then, of course, we would like to open the floor for you to fire away your questions, and we will do our best to provide you with the answers. Then I will do myself an overview of the Cassini Space Entrepreneurship Initiative, followed by a 1-minute pitch. I understood that we have so far one, but if you want to do it impromptu, just let us know, and then you will definitely fit the program. Followed by closing remarks or conclusions, if there are any, and then, of course, the networking and matchmaking session. Just a little bit about the CASSINI Hackathon and mentoring. This is one of the pillars of the Cassini Entrepreneurship Initiative. So it has 6 hackathon events. This is the 6th one. There are 10 events happen at the same time in different locations in Europe. 60 local organizers, and it happens in a hybrid formal, online, but also on site, most importantly on sites. 3 winning teams per edition. Now, let me see. There's a lot of writing. I don't think you need to read this, but the most important thing about this is the fact that we will utilize Earth observation data from Copernicus, satellite positioning and navigation, services like Galileo and EGNOS, in order to bring real change within future application and services for humanitarian assistance in international development. So focusing on sustainable development goals or access to water, access to clean water and food supply. Sorry for the Dutch sun. It's very rare, but when it happens, it's very sunny in my attic. These are the 3 challenges or the topics of the challenges. So, as I said, supporting sustainable infrastructure development, strengthening food security and access to clean water, and then the 3rd one, understanding and forecasting forced migration. This is how the hackathon already started. We are almost in the 1/3, if not half of the cycle. So everything started in the 1st of September. Of course, started much earlier when we submitted our proposal, which we won, and then we have 1st of September, we started to organize. Then the Big Ideas campaign, 9 to 19 October, the actual hackathon between 3 and 5 November, demo day of the 9th of November, and then winner mentoring between December 23 and May 24. As I said, the hackathon is being organized by dotSPACE and Royal Haskoning. Registration deadline is 26th of October. So you still have time to punch the register button. If you haven't done it so far, please do it. I think there are some limited spaces, but I'm not sure about this. Yeah, the registration button. And yeah, if you snap now the QR code, then you will have access to the registration website. And then without any further introduction, I'm giving the floor to Djeevan. Let me see if I stop my sharing. Okay.
I think I can do that. I just overrule you. So do you see this?
Yes.
Cool. Welcome. Good afternoon, morning, evening, wherever you are. Yeah, and I was asked to present you a little bit about sustainable infrastructure and the leverage of space technology. Now you can talk about sustainable in many different ways, but I'm taking the approach of climate change and the risk and resilience on infrastructure. And hopefully it's interesting. So who am I? I studied photonics and image recognition a very long time ago. I did my internship and my thesis in the European Space Agency. That became my passion. I did not get to work in it. I worked for these companies over 28 years. IBM Energy is RWE. That's one of the largest energy companies. And now 5 years with Royal Haskoning. And my passion is understanding the market needs, applying new technology and developing new products and services. And I love to work with startups and other new businesses. A little bit about Royal Haskoning DHV. So an engineering company, 140 years in business. We design physical infrastructure. We design stuff like airports and rail and tunnels and whatever. We design business processes like supply chains, passenger flows, traffic flows, water flows. And we look at the impact that they have on the planet. And we look at how the planet and the weather has an impact on these first two. And by understanding how the facilities and processes are exposed to climate and weather events, we can help our customers to become more resilient to these events. And nobody needs to explain that over the last 3 years, what's going on. So our societies and economies are dependent on infrastructure. And that's a changing thing. There's so many challenges going on, from the aging workforce to trade wars, to depleting resources, over-optimized supply chains, changing supply chains. We have climate change, we have environmental collapse, and it doesn't stop there. So we are really in need of making these infrastructures resilient. And just to give you a view on the size of the disruptions that are going on, this is a slide from Maersk, so the big container shipping company. In 1.5 years after COVID, they had 24, 26 events that disrupted their business. And that just gives you an indication of how turmoil the whole economic situation has become. Now, we're not going into that part. We're going into the climate part, which is having a bigger and bigger impact on businesses worldwide and economies. And I often have to explain this, that climate is the long-term trends in the weather, and the weather is the short-term version of that. But people often ask, is the current weather today a result of climate change? You cannot say that, but you can say that certain trends are the result of climate change. And although there are still people doubting that, it's clear where we're heading. On the extreme weather event last week in Germany, the scientists made another statement. They said that mankind has wasted its opportunity to keep climate change a controllable event, and that we're now entering the era of uncontrolled weather situations, which is very disturbing, but it is what it is, and therefore we need all the help to be able to identify where the risks are. Now, there's two sides of climate change. There's the mitigation part. That's what, how do we reduce the impact that we all have on the environment and on the planet? And there's the other side, the adaptation. The planet is changing. And even if we would stop all the carbon emissions today, the weather will continue to change for the next 100, 200 years. And it will become more extreme and will more frequently extreme. So even though we still need to do the mitigation part, and it's extremely important, we also need to prepare to adapt to a changing situation. And that's the rest of the story. So physical risks from climate change, droughts, flooding, sea level rise, they have an impact on supply chains. They have an impact on where goods are produced. Will India and Bangladesh still be able to produce cotton in the future, or should we change in Europe and the US to wood fibers or other types of sources? There's changes in demands for products and services. Will the Mediterranean become too hot for tourism to go there in the peak time of summer? And will we therefore see a shift to the more cooler parts of Europe? And that comes along with a change in demand of products and services. But in the end, it's all a financial impact on an organization. Now, the mitigation part, reducing the impact, that's controlled through financial disclosures of companies. So they're measured if they're actually doing an energy transition, moving away from fossil fuel, biodiversity, sustainability. They're all part of that element. But the upper part, the one that we're talking about, is if you understand where you are exposed to all these extreme events, physical risk, then you can take certain measures. And by taking these measures, you increase your resilience to these events in the future. And that's the difference between mitigation, adaptation, and climate resilience. And resilience starts with understanding your risk. Now, climate change leads to higher temperatures. It leads to shifting climate zones, changing weather patterns. And traditionally, the whole focus of many different organizations has been on the hazard forecasting and the hazard identification. So how often will certain flood events happen? Will they happen once every 200 years, or now maybe quicker? Will a storm event happen every 30 years, but now in every 10 years? And that's been the traditional risk event, but that's not what a business needs to know. In the end, it's only the start to understanding what's my impact on my business if these events happen. Will there be water available if I'm a beer brewer in certain parts of the world? Can I still produce food? How will diseases evolve? Are my employees at risk from heat waves and stuff like that? So that's a shift in the risk business going on, where a lot of science is needed, because the impacts even today are not really good understood. Now then there's something like sectoral vulnerability, and this is where infrastructure comes into play. We think about climate change, about heat events. Just look at Europe over the last months. Heat events have an impact, but in hot parts of the world, like in Africa or the Middle East, they know how to deal with it. So airports, for instance, they have people on the platform who wear cooling vests. And they have longer runways, because the effect of hot air is that air gets thinner and airplanes have less lift. So therefore the runway needs to be longer. But the same heat event, if it happens in the UK or in the Netherlands or in Western Europe, The airports cannot deal with it. First of all, the employees of the platform don't have these cooling vests. The runways cannot be extended. If it takes about 10 years to get the permits and to actually build a longer runway. So all these things have an effect on each other. And last year in the UK, 4 airports had to be closed down because of too hot temperatures. It has an effect on the runways. If the runways are made of tarmac, then if it's 38 degrees, tarmac is black. It heats up to 60, 70 degrees Celsius if there's a clear blue sky. And as a result, it gets soft. And if you then land an airplane on the tarmac, on the runway, it deforms and you have very expensive repairs to do. But it's not only the heat, it's also extreme cold. So that second picture is a telco tower. They're not designed to have this much ice on them. So it's not only the heat, but it's also other extremes. If you look at the Alps, the snowfall, it's getting less and less. It's unsustainable to have the amount of skiing resorts in the Alps because, the snow is not there. And the alternative, artificial snow, is also unsustainable. But it also has an effect on the rivers. The River Rhine was at an extreme low again last summer. And last year, there was an 8 billion euro impact on the German economy as a result of the low water level in the Rhine. So ships can take less cargo up and down. Tourism ships even have to switch between different ships who cannot get past the part of the Rhine in Germany where it's only 76 centimeters deep. So they have to come up with touring cars to replace the travel. We see the rail networks. If it's getting too hot, they bend because they expand. We see businesses who traditionally said, can you do a risk assessment on climate change and weather, but you don't have to look at my energy provisioning because I have contracts with my energy provider that they will be able to provide extra energy in times of crisis. And if they can't, there is a fine for them to pay me out. But last year in Mexico, the largest reservoir was at 3% full, and that prevented one of the largest steel companies in South America to actually produce steel because there was no alternative energy provisioning. And this is what McKinsey has been saying for 2 years now. Businesses need to start at the systemic risk and move beyond just looking at their own facilities. So they also need to take into account energy provisioning, water provisioning, the availability of personnel. And this is really the challenge that infrastructure is facing as a result of weather and climate. Now, the space data has greatly helped to do all kinds of large-scale infrastructure assessments. So we're able to track, like many others, hundreds of thousands and millions of objects in the world on 17 different natural hazards. But that has always been based on historic data. And so, for instance, this picture is an interesting one. That's Ho Chi Minh. You can see where it's subsiding over 10, 20, 30 years. It's also subject to flooding because the rain basically follows the terrain. So this was what could be done. But by now, the new space technology is providing more and more and more data, which is getting impossible to digest for scientists and others to come up with new conclusions. So there's also a new technology coming around, which is AI. So one of the things that we see happening, large language models, of which ChatGPT is the best known example. They're an example of a foundation model, and there's all kinds of tech companies, in this case, IBM, and they're taking in the Sentinel data and other data, either the satellite ones, which are 3 terabytes a day, and then they take several years of this data, and they try to train what's called a foundation model to digest these enormous amounts of data. And out of that data, they're then trying to come up with how's the land use changing, how's the biomass changing, flood and fire mapping. The same thing they're now doing on weather data, which is 100 times larger. Can you do outage predictions for energy companies? Can you do improved weather forecasting? And that's all part of a generative AI approach. So again, space data is feeding this, but it's leading to a different kind of image processing and data processing than in the past. And all these things are relevant to what we need to do in order to make businesses and economies safe and resilient from climate change. So, very briefly, our societies depend on infrastructure. The infrastructure is at risk from climate change. Space technology can help identify those risks, but the risk only on selected facilities is not enough. We need a systemic business impact view. When the risks are clear, businesses can take measures which makes them more resilient to these events in the future and keep our economies running. And AI is the exciting new field in this domain. And with that, I would like to thank you for your attention.
Amazing. Thank you very much.
So, over to you.
So, yeah. Should we open the floor for questions at this moment? Oh, anybody from the audience has a question for Djeevan? If not, I can start, of course. That's the job of the host, right?
Oh, okay.
Avoiding the silence moment. As a company, it's very interesting how you approach the risk mitigation, and also the adaptation. How much do you look also on the policy cycle side? Because, for example, each country has adopted national plans for adaptation to climate change. Are these adaptation plans useful for you, or are you consulting them? And also, for the past, I think, 2 or 3 years, there's more satellite observation being introduced in the policy cycle. So do you have any comment on this?
Yeah. I personally, in my part of the business, don't look at policies, because policies drive the change in the market. And there's a good example between the US and Europe. In Europe, financial institutes, it's mandatory for them to get their climate risk transparent. In the US, it isn't. So we have a whole bunch of contracts where we get very detailed climate risk assessments on the portfolios of the financial industry who invest in infrastructure, in ports, in airports, in whatever. And because they need to know if the businesses that they invest in are at risk from climate change. But in the US, that's not the case. So if I'm not mistaken, there's 12,800 businesses in Europe who have to start thinking about their climate risk. So the financial institutes must do it. They invest in other businesses, and therefore these businesses are starting to call out for who can help me understand my risk. And the majority has no clue. Everybody can understand flood risk and everybody can understand heat waves. But the fact, like I said, from a runway that's a tarmac runway, 38 degrees, is a big problem. If the water temperature of a river gets too hot, and power plant cannot take in cooling water anymore. And all these nitty-gritty details are known in the industries itself. And that's what makes them transparent. but it requires policy to make them report on that. So if you look at mitigation and adaptation, then in the mitigation part, ESG, environment, social, and governance, and sustainability, they are measured every year in their annual reports. What are you doing to have a less impact on the planet? The same thing is not true yet on physical risk. And unless that happens, the majority of businesses will continue to do what they're doing today. So it's the financial sector who actually takes the steps here. But if we want to keep our economies running, we need to make sure that the businesses start acting.
Mm-hmm. Question from the audience?
It's all clear.
Okay, I don't know how we are doing with the time. I think.
Yeah, I see that Noor is raising her hand. Yeah, so you can ask your question.
Yes, just related to what Djeevan said, let's say the companies need to look into the impact they create. That is one of the materiality. And the other one is what the changes that he explained impacts the company itself. So there is dual materiality. In fact, the European Union approved the, let's say, corporate sustainability and responsibility directive, which requires companies to analyze the dual materiality to be able to, let's say, or explain afterwards what actions they will take to, let's say, mitigate them or adapt. So there is a process. I'd like to see, Djeevan, your view, for example, how you do that in Royal Haskoning.
As a company, or
as a company?
How we do that?
Yes, so because you pointed out very important points, and so I'm looking at you. Maybe you are leading the way in that area.
Okay, well, the ESG part is not my part of the business, but what I do know about it is that we have a very strong commitment to become carbon neutral. We're reducing flights all across the board, taking trains where, as an alternative, green energy instead of fossil fuels. So that's strongly driven by a number of initiatives in the company. And on the physical side, so what we do for physical risk, I should say, what we do for our customers, we also do for ourselves. So we track all our own locations, and we can track our suppliers on how they are exposed to natural events in the future. And that drives other decision-making processes. So for instance, opening a location in a different place than we intended to because it might be flood-prone areas 10, 20 years from now.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think we can also elaborate on the question if it's not satisfying for you. The answer during the matchmaking and the discussion, we have a quick question from Peter, which is saying risk is clear to him, so that's good. But he asked about elaborating on the unique role of space data plays in this. I mean, how can I translate this? How much space data is a game changer for you, compared with 10 years ago?
Oh, yeah, that's mind-boggling. There's so much data already that it's difficult for our people and others in the industry to keep up with it. If it's being able to analyze where floodings have occurred, Space data is especially interesting in areas of the globe where there's no in situ data, so no sensor networks and others, like Africa or Middle America, countries like Mexico. Space data is also extremely interesting, for instance, if you take into account subsidence. And we did an analysis of Kansai airports a couple of years ago. We had to model the impact of typhoon flooding. And together with a Dutch space company called Sensor, we analyzed the two islands. And one of the islands showed all kinds of subsidence, making the risk of flooding of a typhoon more prominent. But the other island was clean. And there was a weird thing. And then they looked into the data, and it turned out the other island was sinking so fast that it exceeded the thresholds of the algorithms. So it's an example of how space data has so many different types of data, infrared, spectral, etc., that the challenge is really in understanding what you can do with it, combine it all together, and then also being able to understand what the business impact is that you're looking for. Mm-hmm. And that makes it extremely difficult. So the space data is in abundance, and it only gets worse. And the recent one that I ran into are these foundation models, which are a completely different way of doing stuff. So you can imagine we have hydrologists who create flood models, 3D models to run flood forecasting systems for customers. But a machine learning type of approach is completely different. It doesn't understand hydrologic modeling. And yet this whole new technology is coming around very, very fast, giving us capabilities that many people are unaware of, because in general, engineers and this type of consultants are not trained on that kind of data science technology. So what you're getting now, I mean, you got the space people.
Yeah, I would take this with a grain of salt, because first of all, I don't understand the generative models. It's going to be now in October, it's going to be a large World Summit on AI. Generative AI is going to be everywhere in all sessions. But I also work for the Dutch Geological Survey. And then, since you mentioned, we work side by side, data scientists with the hydrologists, with the geologists to understand subsidence. Actually, the Dutch Geological Survey, TNO, is the one that established the land subsidence working group at UN. So it's a problem at the UN level at this moment. But also what we developed within a project which was called Think or Sync, it was also responsible AI, because it's very dangerous also to hand in the conclusions to a black box at some point. And then I think this is generative AI. It's very interesting, but also we have to be very careful about the biases, about the things that the models introduce into the system. So what we felt doing this project, actually, we need more mainstream technologies in this disruptive technology, AI, cloud, and so on, to embrace other industries and other verticals in order to make us understand, and also to level up the power of human knowledge with the power of the machines, because it's already a big problem, as you said. So I would also treat this not like completely against, but also be careful the step that we are doing at this point. I do see the value, but at some point we need to make a step-to-step approach. I remember being a small child, and always my professor says, do step-by-step the exercise. Don't jump steps, because then I don't understand what you're doing. So that's where we are at this moment, I think.
AI has its disadvantages. I fully agree with you, and trust is definitely one of them. But like I said, the space data is coming around in so big abundance that it's impossible to digest for the experts on our side. And then foundation models are an approach to start dealing with this. And the whole industry, the tech industry, is working on these. Can you trust them or not? Should you validate them in a different way? So I fully agree on that. Like I said, I was just sketching what's happening in the world, and we need to do something with it, because the simple conclusion is the vast majority of our economies are not ready for climate change. We have no clue. 9 out of 10 people that I talk to don't understand how they are already impacted today with their business. And we need to make them understand, because if the businesses go out, our societies go out. So that's the challenge. And I think there's a huge role to play for space industry, but just the data itself is not enough. We need a multidisciplinary approach to understand how it impacts certain things. And that's where the challenge will be.
Yeah, I think this is maybe also the role of the hackathon in a couple of weeks from now. It's actually looking at the problem and challenges, and how do we resolve them and make them understandable to the laymen, the people that will use them.
Yeah,
so that's also important.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we start from a specific use case, and then we provide the solution, which okay, I'm gonna push this discussion after 5 o'clock when we have the networking and the matchmaking session. I have to jump now to the part of the presentation about the Cassini in general. Yeah, I'm gonna fly through this presentation. It is really larger than it was supposed to be, but I did it in order for you all to have all the information in one place. So I'm not going to present everything, but if you want to get a specific information, you can use the presentation I did in a PDF format. Let me just start the presentation. So, okay, Cassini Hackathon mentorship and hackathon is part of the greater Cassini Space Entrepreneurship Initiative. It goes hand in hand with the R&D cycle, with the European Commission cycles of 7 years. So it is a program that started in 2021 and finished 2027. Yeah, so what Cassini does, it's basically supporting entrepreneurship, but also stimulating new capital coming into the industry through different forms, either venture or debt funding, but also procurement. And then all these elements, they are developed in multiple institutions at European level, but also contracts that are signed every day between the European institution, national institution, and banks, and then venture funding. So this is the image that I think you have to look at it. I mean, I haven't checked what is the situation of how you can raise money or get money or grants besides the Horizon Europe for some time. So suddenly in 2 years, this is the image that we are. I think it's so much happened for the past 2 years that my mind is completely numb. So basically you have the Cassini hackathons, then you have the Cassini prizes, the Cassini challenges, both start in 2021, 2022. Then you have the seed and growth funding, 6 venture capital funds signed with 1 co-investment starting 2022, matchmaking. There are a lot of matchmaking events happening as we speak. In October, there are 4 matchmaking events, and you can find them on Cassini EU webpage. Then you have the business growth, which is the Cassini Business Accelerator. That's a very interesting program, which I present a little bit later in the following slides. It started already in Q1 2023 with a cohort of 20 space startups in a 6-month program. Then you have also the in-orbit demonstration, public offerings, space stocks, of stock exchange, capacity building with a lot of mentors, with Cassini Academy, and the many other tools that are at your disposal. I think this is one of the sweeping measures for entrepreneurship, focusing on a single industry that I've seen for the past years. This is the Cassini Business Accelerator. Of course, you can read the bullets. It's quite obvious, but what is important is the timeline. So basically, this year, 40 startups will be selected for the program. Batch 1 already happened in May, and they will have the demonstration day on the 25th of October. So if you want to register to the event and see what is this about and how the companies through the program develop, and then what the solution they come up after 6 months, you can register for the demo day. And then in November, already the second call for the batch 2 started in August, and the open call closed in 29th of September. I'm sorry that I came rather late, but the good news is that's another cycle that starts in April. So they will select the batch 2 in this month in October, and then they will start the new cycle of 6 months in November. And as I said, the demo day will happen in April 2024. And also that's when the third batch selection restarts, also in April 2024. So realistically speaking, you have the chance now to jump into the wagon, see what this program does for the companies, see what kind of solution they are, what kind of solution they propose, but also think about, is this something interesting for you to participate, to apply for it? And then definitely you're in time for batch number 3. And then you would have learned already a lot of things from it already. That's the Cassini matchmaking. So basically for each of these Cassini accelerated Cassini matchmaking, there's a specifically dedicated section on the Cassini EU website. And these are the events. You can register to them. Most of them, they are open. They happen on site, but some of them, they also happen already happen or happen online. Yeah, it's not really, I'm not a really venture investor, but definitely this is going up a lot. From this page, I think the one before last link, it's very important, where if you want, for example, consult the 6 investment venture capitals, you can access the link there, and then you will be redirected, and you can choose if you want equity funding for your own business. Also, it's been plugged into deal room, so it's a total volume of 1.1 billion that the Cassini matchmaking has done so far. The good news is this cycle of Cassini will be finished soon, and the second cycle of matchmaking is already open for applications. There's already a new proposal for a new type of, for a new and refreshed Cassini matchmaking event. So this doesn't stay there and get rotten. It continuously evolves to respond to the market needs. Yeah, debt funding for space companies. This is the Helios Space Stock Index. Yeah, it's connected to the market transactioning, and ending up with the Cassini Hackathons. I only listed the last 3 ones, actually the last 2, with the third one, or the 6th from the generation, that will happen in November. And yeah, also mentioning the Cassini prizes, you can also nominate, or you can participate to Cassini prizes for 2021. I think there was a Cassini Maritime Prize specifically for marine litter. But also there are a 1 million prize pool within the Cassini challenges. As I mentioned, also EUSPA Space Academy, that's a very useful academy, and there's a lot of academies now being set up where basically you can consume knowledge case studies, and then we have a lot of them. If you will participate in the mentorship, in the hackathon during the mentorship meetings, we can always share all these tools and academies. And again, what was on the first page with dates, these are the links that I think they are very useful for you if you want to go one by one. And again, this presentation, I'm not a specialist in Cassini myself. I inspire myself from a presentation done by Thomas Johnson from DG DEFIS, done this year in the 54 International Paris Air Show. So that's Cassini disentangled. I think for me the most interesting concept, which I think is very close to the hackathon maybe, and the life after the hackathon, is the business accelerator. So I really recommend you to check out and then see how, as an entrepreneur, you can learn or even find raise fund, because it's a different type of funding. Sometimes being an entrepreneur, you think that Horizons Europe funding is for you, but I would say as a single company, you rarely almost know, not possible, you will access Horizon funding by yourself. So this is maybe the place to go as a space industry startup to fund your ideas and then grow your idea to actually a product or a service. So that's the messages that I wanted to send. And of course, we can discuss more in the after session from 5. So let me see, because I have also to do the checking with the agenda. So I think we are good in terms of the agenda, but we actually have to introduce somewhere the 1 minute pitch session. Katia, can you help me and point out who is supposed to do the pitch?
Yeah, the pitch is going to do Marina Kornevich.
Okay, Marina. Okay, I see you.
Yeah,
Okay,
she's the CEO of
you have the
Startup.
floor. I stopped the share screening.
Hi, hello. Nice to meet all of you. Sounds pretty exciting what you're talking
Well, I'm
about.
going to give you 2 minutes. Maybe you can introduce yourself in a minute and then do your pitch in the other.
Yeah, a moment, I'm going to share my screen, probably. Could you please help me out with this one? Yeah, moments.
Do you want to share the tab or the entire screen? Just share the screen.
Moments. Here's the... And here we are. So hello, once again, my name is Marina. I'm here to represent Inframent, and I'm going to talk to you today about the underground infrastructure construction. I'm not sure if you're aware, but one damaged cable related to the fiber to the home connection causes roughly 35 kilograms of CO2 emissions. So I don't know if it is a very well-known fact, but there are 35,000 cases of those in Netherlands alone. And the statistics is pretty consistent for the last 5 years. So altogether, they cause at least 1.5 million kilograms of CO2, and this is rounded up to the smaller side, very much so. So how we plan to tackle that? Basically, Inframent is a company that aims to enable GNSS augmentation for dual frequency smartphones, which is not a new idea, but our approach is a bit different. So we hopefully are going to be able to achieve the results. What we are going to do is we're going to provide the right tool at the right time to the construction workers. So we're going to reduce dramatically the amount of visits to the site, because the construction of the cables could be documented while the trench is still open. So it's basically going to be way more precise. And also we're going to provide the web app that is going to show to the project manager the overview of the current situation, whether damages or not damages. So we are aiming to reduce the amount of site visits altogether. This is all I have to say for today. If you have any questions, please feel free.
Can we have questions, Katia? 1 or 2 maybe?
Yes, of course.
I have a question, Marina. So the company is called?
Inframent.
Okay.
Infrastructure documentation.
Okay, and it's established in the Netherlands?
Yes, we are actually at ISABIC. We are
at
not
ISABIC.
far from the
Okay.
Space Campus.
Okay, great, amazing. How comparable is the amount of CO2 that you save, comparable, as you say, with a small industrial unit, like, I don't know, maybe even a farm? What I'm trying to say it is, I don't know top of my head because I'm not in cost-benefit analysis myself. But how comparable? Because if all this trouble is done for a small offset of CO2, then maybe it's not the best way to tackle the message. But if it's comparable, how does it compare? For example, how many pigs farm is the offset that you try to avoid with this measure?
I'm not sure about how many pig farms are that.
Yeah.
Basically, what we're trying to do is we're trying to reduce the amount of using the vehicles that basically related to any type of like changes that happen at the construction site. So if you get a very good remote overview of the situation, like it doesn't we I'm a little bit sorry.
No, it's okay. It was a tough question, but it's also a selling point for you. Because if you present to a SEG serious officer, you have to tell him how your measure is going to save the world in comparison with the other measures. So that's an important. But we can also discuss this meeting is big because our office is sitting just. We are also in the space campus. And we can always discuss about this. And I have another question. And I don't want to steal the floor. If somebody has questions, please fire away. I haven't checked now. Okay. Are you planning to use also and integrate satellite data into your model?
This is a good question. I'm going to start with the first one because I want to address how we actually try to help the climate change. Well, basically, based on our pilot, we had 3 site visits, and during all of those site visits, the damage to the cable has been done, which required at least 4 trips back and forth from multiple team members. So given that we were at one construction site and one company that has project has at least 5 active construction sites per day, this is bare minimum. So we're talking like basically 150 kilometers trips per day. So I think it's substantial. Maybe it's not like in a global scale very big, but it's quite substantial, I think. To address the second question, it depends on the GNSS augmentation technique that we are going to use. At the moment, we're experimenting and we're not using satellite view at the moment, but the first round of experiments include satellite view, yes.
Okay, great. Any more question? Any more pitches? If the spur of the moment you want to pitch your idea, now is the moment. Otherwise, well, thank you very much, first of all, Marina, and sorry for the difficult question, but I always see opportunity to increase the level of your storytelling, and I think we have to discuss about this with another occasion. I think it's a very interesting idea, and congratulations for it. Maybe another question for you: are you planning to join also the hackathon?
She left.
We lost Marina.
Yes.
Okay, so that's yeah. Okay, so it's just maybe the effect of the. Okay, you're back.
Sorry, guys. I went to like somehow I was put in the break room.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was too fast in creating another activity for our webinar. Yeah.
So yeah, my last question is, do you find the hackathon interesting, and then would you participate or?
Yes, for sure.
Okay, great.
Yes.
You don't have to, there's no string attached here, but just wanted to ask. Okay, so closing remarks. I think the view that Djeevan presented on the challenges that climate change poses to infrastructure, I think it was a very nice top to bottom overview, but also an important lesson that looking from top to bottom is not going to resolve the problem. So we actually need to go back to where the problems occur and then study in a sequential the risk, the hazard, and then the mitigation, the adaptation for each problem that arises. So, for example, like Marina did with the optical cable, this is an interesting application of it related to the infrastructure. And infrastructure, I remember for the past years, always was part of the assessment of use of satellite data for infrastructure. And I think there are very interesting use cases, but only now when we see the connection between the infrastructure and other Earth physical systems, we really understand how important is the infrastructure and how perilous it is. So the closing remarks would be, thank you very much, Djeevan. Thank you, Marina, for the pitch. And then encourage you all to look at the Cassini EU website and then go section by section. And then if you don't understand anything, then we're always available for you for discussion and then disentangle what is written in there.